We'll now continue with the second question and answer session. Our first question in this segment comes from Tianjin, China. It is faxed in, so I will read the question. In China, a lot of change has happened. People have more money than they used to, but we can see less people are happy than they used to be. When they have a lot of money, they could imagine. Now that they have a lot of money, as they could imagine. Okay. Do you think that this situation will be lasting, the situation of sustained unhappiness?
No. Ultimately, things will need to change. How they will change, when they will change, that's a good question. Thomas Friedman, who wrote a book called The World is Flat, as well as Alexis and the Olive Tree, said it very well. Is that the road to progress in China is an Autobahn, 100-mile-an-hour freeway that has a huge speed bump right in the middle of it. And that is the conjunction of all the people who are moving from the rural areas of China into the urban areas of China, the mix of that, the high pollution, the poor working conditions that are faced are often a cauldron that, in combination with other political issues, shall we say, is a mix that China will be running very well, but it may potentially explode.
All right, great. Now, next question is from Mexico. Go ahead, please.
Adelante, México, su pregunta, por favor. Sí, buenos días, adelante, su pregunta, por favor. We seem to have dropped the caller.
Oh, sorry to hear that. It seems that we have...
Al parecer...
Okay, is the caller on?
Tenemos al...
Okay, so in the meantime, let's go ahead with another fax question.
Yes, we have a question here. How to measure the efficiency of these methods to then measure the results that we are looking for? So how can we measure these two systems? That is it. Thank you.
Measurement is often a very difficult issue, and in large part, it really revolves around two things. There are objective measures, and there are more subjective kind of measures. The objective kind of measures one can be looking at are such things as absenteeism, turnover, how many potential employees apply for new positions because they have heard good things about the company, that kind of thing. On the more subjective side, what one can do is to be conducting employee surveys. In that particular way, one gathers more subjective feelings and perceptions about what is going on, what the problems are occurring and such, and then use that in a way to guide the kind of changes that management may need to take to be improving the situation.
So when you do a survey, are you measuring the collective thought of your employees, or are they dealing with individual situations, or how does that work?
It can be broken out in a number of ways. For the most part, though, it's done across the entire organization and about what issues they have. If one breaks down the data too much, you have a small issue about breaking anonymity, and then people may not feel they can give a proper response because they're concerned their responses will be identified by management and all the consequences that would be occurring from that.
I see. Very good. Thanks. We go to Chihuahua, Mexico for our next question, and that is a question that is faxed in, so I'll go to that question. Sharing knowledge and using it productively is a concept easy to mandate but difficult to implement in an environment where nobody gives any and everyone sells. So what is the key to achieve the concept within our organization today? So knowledge is a commodity that is valuable these days. So how do you deal with that issue and sharing information and sharing knowledge with your colleagues?
Really, there are a couple of responses to that. First of all, for one, is that it's an issue of infrastructure. In other words, do you have the ability to share information? Do you have the IT systems in place? Do you have wikis in place? Do you have group discussions in place? Do you have internal websites where people can go to, and so on and so on? That's part of the answer. The other part of the answer is that people realize very, very easily that information is power. And when information equals power, they may be very reluctant to share it, because what they're doing is that they are in essence sharing their power, and people are concerned if they share the power, they're going to be losing their power. Whereas exactly it's the opposite case. The more they share, the more powerful they will become.
So it develops a synergy with your colleagues to share information, get information, and give information, and develop that rapport and trust. All right, next question is from La Paz, Mexico. Go ahead, please.
Yes, the question is, what can we do if, as employees, we have a good attitude for change in terms of the institution, but our new leaders, our new managers are blocking this change or this attitude in terms of change? What can we do? Thank you.
So if I understand you right, the employees are motivated, but management is not. That is a hard and difficult situation. If I can suggest a couple of things, one of which is to ask yourselves the question why management seems to either be ignorant of or resistant to whatever it is that you're trying to do. They may have a variety of, for lack of a better word, legitimate reasons for resisting in terms of what you want to do. Those reasons have to be addressed and worked on. The other particular aspect of it, which you might also want to try, is to see if you can try some kind of example or develop some kind of pilot project that would demonstrate your positive attitude in the first part, and also help management in terms of whatever it is they are trying to accomplish, so they can see that what you are trying to accomplish is ultimately designed to help them. And getting their self-interest involved that way can be very helpful in persuading them to do what you want them to do.
Great, thank you. Again, another vast question, this one also from Mexico. It deals with talent management, and talent management is a great challenge in government organizations given the rigidities of civil service systems and short-term interests of elected officials and term directors. What would you suggest to make this concept more of a priority among politicians and career public service?
Oh, those politicians. Don't we just love to hate them, don't we? Part of the issue really is ultimately that you have to hit them on the head. I think that perhaps is the most direct way to put it. That is that there are going to be drastic consequences to not bringing the right people together in an organization at the right time. And if you can demonstrate to them that indeed the consequences of them not acting are so severe that they're actually willing to do something about it, that really will be helpful. In essence, because a pet project of theirs, for example, it didn't occur because the young, technically oriented people didn't want to work for government, and as a result, the particular project couldn't be implemented. Those kind of examples are more likely to help them change, if you will, than any kind of, either that or vote them out of office if you have the opportunity to do so.
And we stayed Mexico for the next question, also faxed in. Is human capital becoming less important with the explosion of automation and learner production systems that eliminate more and more human intervention?
Probably at the positions that are relatively simple, that can be replicated easily, that can be, in essence, routinized, is that for those particular portion, the human portion of the job probably will become less and less. On the other hand, is that for those particular positions also creates a much more sophisticated need, because computers can't do everything, and things go wrong all too easily, as what I'm sure all of us know, and that basically requires human intervention to do so at a higher and more sophisticated level. And in that particular case, there will be even more of a need for human capital, but the human capital will have to be better educated, will have to be more flexible, and will have to be more tenacious in terms of dealing with those problems and not simply just accept what things are going on.
And the other issue is that automation doesn't happen by itself. You have to have software engineers and designers to create automated systems. So, as you said, the higher order programming and design is still done by human intervention.
Indeed. There's also the fear of that, too, of those more sophisticated kind of positions, if you will, might be outsourced. For example, there's a concern in the United States that about so many particular jobs are being outsourced to India, for example. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal not that long ago, and in essence they're saying there's actually a backlash from that because salaries of Indian software engineers have increased so much that it's just cost effective to be hiring American software engineers as Indian software engineers.
That's amazing.
Yes. So eventually everybody's going to be paid the same.
Right.
So then the question is, who's going to be the best to do the job?
Right. And we stay in Mexico for the next question, which relates to happiness again. It's the issue that we were talking earlier in this program. But how can we promote a more optimistic view of life and a positive attitude within our organizations? Do you think we can change our predominantly materialistic approach to success and happiness?
I guess the short answer to that one is no. I don't think that in a permanent kind of way one can do so, because I think it's a continual battle, if you will, that has to be fought every time. In one particular case, there will be things that can be done structurally, as what I mentioned in the module. At other particular times, though, one simply just may have to adapt. And one can adapt by reframing, as what I mentioned. In addition to that, if one cannot reframe, and if you have to stay in that situation for whatever odd reason, then you have to deal with the, for lack of a better word, the physiological consequences of your stress. And that's where such things as exercise come in, meditation come in, more personal kind of things, aspects, when you can't control the situation.
So it is a situation of working on your intrinsic reward versus extrinsic and monetary rewards that you're receiving from your environment.
Indeed. Indeed.
Okay, so how do we balance that? Do we work on ourselves, or do we demand from the environment to adapt, or how does that work?
I think the simple answer to that is you do what you can.
Okay.
And if you have influence on the environment, you change the environment.
Okay.
If you don't have influence on the environment, you can always try to change yourself.
That's a very good answer. That's great. And so the environmental factors, however, are continuously changing, and I think that the challenge, so therefore, is for us to adapt or to change ourselves, or how does that balance work?
I think for the most part you really have three choices.
Okay.
One choice is to change the environment.
Okay.
In other words, the things that are coming eventually to you. Another option is not, if you can't change the environment, simply just to leave. And that may be ultimately the simplest situation, is if the environment that you're in is unsatisfying to you, then find an environment that is. If one cannot do that, if you can't change the environment, and if you cannot change what environment you are in, then the third option is that you, in essence, may have to somewhat detach yourself from that situation, deal with the physiological consequences via exercise, meditation, and the like, and begin to focus on other things that are eventually more satisfying to you.
So these are very, very good strategies. I really appreciate you organizing them in such a form. Do we have more time for another question? Okay, so now the point that you brought up earlier, again, about trying to change your position or change your job, that is possible in a vibrant economy. In less structured economies, how do you go about, is it possible for you to actually create your own jobs, if you will, or your own firm or your own consulting projects?
Well, certainly entrepreneurship is certainly one way of dealing with that situation. Depending upon the legal framework that what you have, in certain countries that's okay to do, in other places it's not. That certainly is one very common kind of thing to do. Certainly in the United States and certain other countries, that is something what a lot of people do. On the other hand, if you cannot do something economically, you may have the choice, too, of doing something with your neighbors.
Okay.
Maybe there is a ditch that you can dig. Maybe there's a canal that you can make. Maybe there is something you can do to reduce the mosquito count. Whatever. In other words, there is potentially something that what you can do, however small or large a way, that will ultimately affect you in terms of what you want to accomplish.
Great. And I think that we have another question coming live from Mexico. Go ahead, please. Right. Okay, I'm sorry that we lost that line. So let's continue our conversation about the possibility of working in the future in the 21st century, especially as the century unfolds, working for big organizations versus smaller organizations and or even your own personal business. Is it true that working in smaller organization lends to more happiness? Does the size of the organization have anything to do with it?
That's a good question. What you get with a smaller organization is things are more intimate. And that intimacy, if you will, is something that what some people thrive on and what can also cause a tremendous amount of conflict. In small organizations, oftentimes they're family-owned. And in the case of them being family-owned, then you have the intersection of family dynamics, who owns the company, which can be different from all the families per se, and the employees themselves. And that can be either a very productive mix, or that can be just a disastrous mix.
That's right. So it doesn't necessarily follow that a smaller family-owned operation is a happier environment than a major corporation, which is probably less intimate. And but based on that, if you develop your own business, so to speak, or entrepreneurship, you can basically shape what you want to do, and so therefore you have to be very careful about how you select the kinds of things that you want to do. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yes, if you work for yourself, you sometimes can choose how you starve. You want to look at it that way. On other particular times, you reap what you sow, and in essence, is that you get the results in terms of what outputs you want. I have to tell you, being a small business person myself with my own consulting company, just as what you have, that it's a rare and a good feeling that when you bring home the bacon, if you will, in essence, and that you land that contract and you get that person to say yes, and you start doing the work. You know, to some extent, it's all downhill from there, because that's where the hard work actually comes in. And so there's a lot to be said for that. But on the other hand, that means you have to have a fair amount of confidence in yourself that you can. What happens if next week it doesn't occur? What happens if the next week it doesn't happen? What happens if the next week it doesn't happen? So what are you going to do then? And do you have the confidence? Do you have the resources? Do you have the abilities to actually go beyond that particular point? If you work for a large corporation, if you get a paycheck, a constant paycheck, a constant amount of work, there's a tremendous amount of security that you get from knowing that you can pay the mortgage, that you can pay the electricity bill, you can pay for health insurance maybe. With all of that. But on the other hand, you don't necessarily get the spice and the attraction of saying, yeah, I just landed something, and because of that, I can do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. So where along that risk continuum you are is something that ultimately you're going to have to decide for yourself.
Great. Thank you for your excellent questions and your excellent comments, but we have run out of time. We hope that you have enjoyed participating once again in this exciting multilingual and multinational program. For further reference and study, you can consult your valuable ITC Participants Manual. Our next live video conference, airing October 4, 2007, will be titled Visioning with Performance and Achievement, the Global Competition Issue. For additional information on this video conference series, including the dates and specific topics for the upcoming programs, please contact ITC. We remind you that all ITC programs are created and copyrighted to Miguel A. Cardenas and may not be taped, stored, reproduced, or retransmitted in any form, in whole or in part, without the written consent of the author. On behalf of all of us, I thank you for your ongoing participation and interest in this unique program. Thank you and see you soon.
Thank you, sir.